Okay. Thank you for being here to the Emotional Regimes and Narrative Poems section. So unfortunately, we don't have the first speaker with us. I mean, she doesn't show up yet. So we're going to start from the second speaker, Dr. Vilina Silvonen from the University of Helsinki. Please, I leave you the floor.
Thank you. I will show my screen, share it here. And then, so do you see it now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I need to, and you hear me also? Oh, yeah. So I'm Vilina Silvonen from University of Helsinki. I'm a PhD student, just finishing my research, and from November onwards, I am going to be a postdoc researcher at the University of Eastern Finland. So in this presentation, it bases on my PhD research, where I have analyzed traditional Karelian lament performances on archival audio recordings. And this presentation bases mostly and mainly on the last article of my dissertation, which is published last year in Finnish journal Elo. In this presentation, I began very briefly with the background, Karelian lament tradition, and how emotions are discussed in earlier research. Then I present the concepts of emotions and affectivity, which I use, and outline the methodology. And to analyze the emotionality and on archival audio tapes, I have applied twofold listening method, in which I have employed sensory ethnography too. I conclude with showing how I, as a listener, become a part of the affective arrangement that forms around the lament. So laments are a genre of oral poetry and a cultural practice performed especially in ritual contexts, but in Karelia, they are also performed in private other than ritual occasions. In general, laments is a widely known wailing tradition in different cultures, but the practice vary from culture to culture. As I said, I concentrate on traditional Karelian laments. My research material consists of archival audio records from Olonets, Karelia, and they are recorded mostly during a few decades in the mid-20th century. Emotions hold a central position in lament performance. In laments, emotions are subjective and collective. They are performed imitatively, produced, and these get real felt experiences. Earlier research and lament interviews in archives state that affective efficacy is essential for proper performances, which means that the overall emotional intensity deepens in the performance. One of the things in the back of my interest are the skeptical comments I have received when I have played the tapes to varying audiences. Often someone comments that the lamenter is just performing, that the emotion is artificial. Then after listening a little longer, or the end of the same lament example, when the emotionality changes, also this skeptical critic commenting may change their mind. This is one of those things that I began to pursue, how to explain this affective effect, how to argue that one can hear the change of the emotionality by audio archival material, or can one? And what happens in the process of lamenter getting into the melancholy, grieving, and longing emotions of lament? One of the first Finnish folklore scholars, Elias Lönnrot, describes the emotionality of laments terrifying and the performance odd in 1836. Another 19th century scholar and collector, Volmari Porkka, gives a more delicate portrayal of a lamenting performance. In 1883, he wrote how a lamenter immersed herself in the sorrowful emotions, and the performance enhanced everyone present. The quality of emotions in laments, the collective aspect of the emotionality, and the affective impact of laments are reported in research of Karelian lament tradition since the early phase. Lauri Honko writes that laments are the poetry of everlasting longing for the departed ones. Martti Haavio has described laments to be that laments express grief of every people. And for example, Aili Nenola, Aleksandra Stepanova, and Eila Stepanova write about the emotionality of metaphoric lexicon and special poetic language with endearment suffixes and forms. Elisabeth Tolbert has analyzed the musical means of the sorrow, and James M. Wills examines emotions of varying lamenting traditions, especially from the perspective of language and communication, employing also the metacultural model, which brings then the practices surrounding lament and lamenting into the focus of analysis. All these discusses emotions mainly as a communicative and ritual practice, and these do not specify what kind of phenomenon the emotions of laments are more precisely. I have focused on the affective side and the diversity of emotional phenomena. I approach emotions with multidisciplinary theoretical understanding and discuss the emotional phenomena in laments by paying attention to affectivity, affective interrelations, experiences, and the circulation of affects. I have analyzed what kinds of phenomena emotions are in the archival audio recordings of laments, and how the emotion appear in these laments. I have focused on various performance features and practices. I have also examined how the relation of these only expressed emotions and the ones that can be interpreted as real felt emotions or emotional experiences, how they are different. And this analytical distinction I have made, it rises from the tapes. And in addition to my own analysis, I have had a small control group. Also, the earlier research stated this kind of difference, as I noted. Moreover, I have analyzed what kinds of affective interrelations and connections the lament performance forms. In other words, my analysis focused on affective arrangement and the affective practices of laments. Then about the concepts. In general, as all we know, the concepts used in emotion and affect studies are overlapping and contradictory, as well as thoughts about ontology of emotions and affects. I apply concepts of emotion and affectivity. I observe emotions as a multi-level phenomenon in which cultural, social, psychological, and physiological factors coalesce. I understand an emotional experience as a subjective state which arises in interaction with one's social, cultural, and biological contexts. Thus, the subjective is also always intersubjective. Furthermore, I distinguish this expression of emotion and felt emotional experiences, which means that one can express emotions without feeling the emotion in question. So one can perform emotions, for example, by intentionally producing emotion signs. And in laments, both these manifestation of felt emotional experiences and these intentionally produced imitative emotions are genuine, proper features. They are embodied automatically as a part of the specific sociocultural practice, and they intertwine in the performance. Then affectivity. With it, I refer to the affecting relations and emotional intensities, the capacity of being affected, to be moved or touched by something. I understand affectivity as some kind of affective betweenness of human and human, or human as well as human and non-human entities. For example, this kind of affectivity can appear between lamenter and the lament. Furthermore, to describe the various affective relations that form in lament performances, I apply a concept of affective arrangement by Jan Slaby, that the concept encompasses the practices, spaces, and participants. And I have also used performance theories, and I find this affective arrangement concept somehow relates to the concept of performance arena by John Miles Foley. In general, I approach lamenting as affective practice, a concept by Margaret Wetherell which refers all the activities, expectations, personal and social histories, memories, the situation, the practices, etc. So in my research, lamenting is seen as affective practice, and a single lament performance is examined as an affective arrangement. Then about the method. So I have analyzed the composition of a lament, especially on the level of textual and musical structures, their interaction and formality. And this is the base and background from where I have moved to the analysis of emotion and affectivity. And the method I have used to analyze these emotions and affectivity, it is multi-level. The main analysis is based on two listening methods, empathetic listening and auditory voice or sound analysis. And this is my application of Anne Tarvainen's listening method to analyze singer's voice and interpretations of songs. And these two listening methods, they do not create a linear analyzing process. Rather, their analysis goes several times back and forth between these two, and they interact closely in the analyzing process. I also use my own experiences as a listener to analyze the archival material. However, I am not focusing on analyzing my own experiences. Instead, my experiences are a tool when I analyze the emotions and affectivity of the lament performances in the archival audio tapes. The auditory sound analysis is listening to the sounds or voice qualities and features that I have interpreted to be connected to the emotions and affective intensity. My interpretations are based on earlier studies of expression and the sound of sadness. Furthermore, to have a better understanding of sounds of crying, I have done some other ethnographic observing, that is, I have analyzed sounds that come out of me when crying or being miserable. I have analyzed these in my real felt emotional experiences that are not attached to listening laments at all. In empathetic listening, I have listened to laments open-mindedly and paid attention to my own experiences, or even just me listening the laments. For me, empathetic listening is listening to the intensity and affectivity, finding the parts of the performance that feel to take a tighter grip of me somehow, the parts that make me listen more closely in the sense of affectives and emotions. The varying features and qualities I have collected from the tapes are strong exhales, emphasized sounds, audible inhales, creaky inhale, this kind of thin sound, tense sound, uncontrolled vibrato, and then sobs and sniffs, some more general changes in the voice, and increasing intensity in general. These symbols in the right side of the table here are the ones that I use in graphs of laments, which are a kind of notation of emotion and affectivity of laments. Some of these features are specific for laments, others are more general. But since every lamenter has her own style and manner to lament, these features are not universal in that sense. The interpretation of emotionality and affectivity depends always on context and the lamenter individual style and manner of lamenting, the recording situation, etc. And here is the graph of lament. The first box is the entire lament. It is a lament performance performed by Eudokia Fedorovna-Sofronova, recorded in 1968 in Olonets, Karelia. And then the box below is the end of the lament, just to make it bigger in this slide. So in a lament, one and same audible feature may appear as a sign of felt emotion or as an imitative expression of emotion. And this separation is only a tool in analyzing in the actual performance these expressed or felt are based on the similar sounds, and these are not similarly separate in the performance as in this analysis. And I prefer to think these as a continuum and not as opposites. Because of the individual styles of lamenting and varying performance situation, there are no straightforward features that would reveal the deepening of the emotional state in the lamenter's voice. The imitative and the real felt emotions are not distinguishable in this sense. Thus, only technical or mechanical sound analysis is not enough. So this is why the empathetic listening is needed. And in this lament graph, also the amount of and frequency of emotion signs increases with the affective intensity. And then to note, all lament performances on archival tapes are not emotional or affective. There are several only dictated or just song-like performances without any audible emotionality. And then finally, briefly about the affective arrangement. So a lament performance is affective in various levels. It creates an affective connection between the lamenter and the audience. Furthermore, according to traditional mythic conception, the other world is also present always in the lamenting situation. Performing a lament induces lamenter's emotions, and this affectivity between lamenter and her lament performance can be seen as an affective connection too. And here the lament includes the composition and formalizity. I have approached this phenomena of affective interaction with the concept of affective circles, and the various simultaneous intersecting circles form this entire affective arrangement. And then an affective connection can develop between a lament performance on an archival audio recording and the listener of the record. This way, the listener, in this case me as a scholar, becomes in a way a participant in the performance, even though the listener does not have a direct influence to the performance situation itself. However, the affective power of the performance can come up to the listening moment and this time. In this case, the affective arrangement forms as a combination of the performance on the tape, my knowledge and competence about the tradition, my expectations and my experiences, as well as my interpretations of the performance in questions. And this is it. Thank you for listening, and if you have special comments and questions, you can send me email. And we have, I think we have time for questions at the end of all presentations. So thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome, Velina. Now it should be the turn of Simona Delic. We decided that the Q&A section will be at the end. So now it's the turn of Simona Delic.
Yes, Musa, thank you very much. I'm a researcher, senior research advisor from the Institute of Ethnology and Folklore Research in Zagreb, from Croatia. I will have a paper about traditional Croatian ballads and emotionality, entitled Encountering Emotions in the Croatian Ballads. It is some 4 pages that I will read. Okay, I start. Studying ballads in more than the last 4 decades has offered gratifying recognition of the 4 ballad plot types that depart from the world of emotions and keep standing like a staircase to the world of emotional stories. Like in the Croatian well-documented and exhaustively interpreted ballad Asa Naginica, or in the Hispanic ballad tradition of a Homeric motive of a return of a wife to the husband's wedding to stop it on time, La Condesita. It is so because the differentiation of the 4 types of the ballad denouement was possible thanks to the different justice and emotional status of the crime in the ballad, understood not only and not at all as a justice court crime and punishment, as in the Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie novels, but also as a Shakespearean and paradisiac and Parnas Casus plots in love and family ballads. Stanko Vraz, a romantic Croatian poet, cherished an utopian vision of a lyrical epic and epico-lyrical plot system of a world literature of the Manuel de Falla El Sombrero de Tres Picos, unity of the 3 cosmoi, Earth, Jupiter, and Venus. Parnassus, giving preference in his collection book to the lyrical ballads in the poetical book Glasy Zubrove Žerovinske from year 1841. This condition is in the Belle Epoque period, especially as afterwards in Bosnian Sephardic ballad tradition and Sarajevo Elazar edition, as these books show, present in the Sephardic ballad, especially if taking into the account the type of the process of collecting and collecting itself of Don Manuel Manrique de Lara. As stated previously, on the occasion of the International Ballad Conference in Gozmartuljek in Slovenia in 1996, in a paper published afterwards in 1997, I recognized ballads of the crime and retribution as the most widespread type of a ballad in the Croatian balladry during the centuries, followed by the kazui philosophical ballads, alongside by the lyrical Parnas balladry, especially in the Croatian and Hispanic ballad tradition, where the intellectual debate in some cases is often whirling around the emotional behavior of the protagonists. Shakespearean tragedies, in shortened form, have tried to show all the wiseness of the world due to the short verse form, where plot doesn't have too much time to evolve. It is important to notice that these crimes have to be understood literally in the first place, and then to be lifted to the metaphorical meaning, if necessary, for the emotional, educational, and intellectual purposes of the canonical literary form, the only one in the traditional literature beside a fairy tale. This can be stated not only for the Croatian ballad tradition, but also for the Hispanic one, and even for the larger comparative scale of ballad traditions, like Italian, Scandinavian, or Anglo-Scottish. In American ballads, an interesting story of an everyday type is recounted. If the denouement is important as this is also the evaluation process of how the plot and round and flat characters in E.M. Forster terminology are formed, depending not only on the poetic discourse primarily, but also on the cultural context studies and analyzed by the literary anthropology, ethnology, and the cultural studies. including of the ballads in the elite canonical literature forms, such as in the Shakespearean drama of King Lear, give preference to the poetic words than to the too intellectual debate of the scientific discourse, highlighting the importance of the scientific or the artistic subject of the reader or the writer and their emotional worlds, who presents himself, herself, necessarily in the Joycean portrait of an artist during his or her youth, in the aristocratic, glamorous context of the ballad poetical story of intimacy and the real world. As if the short form were not enough. Ballad is a pictorial heaven, a kind of surrealist poetry, depending always on juridical statements. The impression of a verse form of all poetical genres, oral or written, is impossible without strong pathos. In this pandemic situation, and even other natural catastrophic situations that threaten nowadays a global world as well as local communities and particular nations, one must look backwards to the 20th century anthologies where such tragedies were mentioned also, but without mentioning a family surrounding, as if the poet of a ballad was afraid to present it in a close reading, but rather as a panoramic view, alleviating in this way the painful event by omitting its concrete private outcomes. The family ballads must be read this way too, especially taking into account the Matrix Croatica anthology, afterwards mostly tragical historical denouement during the Second World War in almost all the universe. If we move interdisciplinary from the study of the oral poetical discourse to other art disciplines, such as painting, for example, one could compare ballads to Victor Turner's opus, for example, that seems to show in the history of its color composition evolution, the evolution of the comprehension of the nature and the sky of the natural elements, as well as the ballads show in the lyrical familiar fan of serious and less serious familiar situations. Peacefully foggy balladic situations intertwine with dramatic stormy weather, either sociologically or familiarly. Although sweet paintings are the norm, as well as in the most beautiful ballads, as well as in the most beautiful ballads, the love stories are narrated with happy endings and family reunions after the Odysseic adventures and departures. The international ballad type of the Odysseic plot are very well known all over the European and pan-Hispanic ballad world. Other types thrive to show the women wit and skills recognized by the society, as in the Warrior Maiden ballad that was noted down in Croatia very early, written down in the Slavonia region, a kind of history of social and emotional life of Venus friends Amazonas. If we take this international ballad of a warrior maiden as an example of the maturity of the folk life in comparison to the elite societal aesthetical preferences, we could state that there is no big difference, hopefully, in emotionality of Amazonian life and intellectual elite's preferences. The 15th century guest ballad from Hungary, this warrior maiden, coexists nowadays philologically together with patriarchist ideology of the upheaval of the ideal lady, as if the football camp was always compared theoretically and platonically to fashion designers' outlets. It would be best to compare ballads as a kind of a pioneer in cultural tourism, almost reachable to everyone, and related to pilgrimages and religious life of annual nature customs, such as harvest, or other events of the year calendar. It propagates the philosophy of Calderón de la Barca, the Spanish writer, The Life is a Dream, not entering too much into the sociology, although one must believe that the origin of each particular ballad was measured carefully in a global and in a local perspective. The Oriental love described in the ballad of different nations as if thrives to propagate a slow life that thrive toward the paradise with the hope of the effective affinities. Goethe's novel. Although mostly female genre, it takes the afternoon off the record to women and men to have time to learn the song of the ballad, to be able to perform it afterwards to friends or family members. Although permitting to everyone to adapt itself toward the philosophy of peripatetic school of speaking with a teacher that must leave the kids alone, as in a Pink Floyd song. The international ballads like the topics of the adventurous matter too, the abduction ballads, the adultery ballads. One would like to compare them to the youth literature, but it is not the case thanks to the holistic societal customs of communal singing and narrating, where the details of variants matter, amplifying the topic often substantially. It is so difficult for youth to be youth literature. The international ballad deal even with the topic of Ovidian metamorphosis, the dragon turn into a beautiful youth in a Croatian and Hispanic ballad, Rimski-Korsakov, Scheherazade, Rico Franco, although without the narrator comment, as if open to individual judgments, without comment, as a kind of parental or grandparent embrace and care, as well as societal protection. If we take a close look at the ballad anthologies of different nations, it would be interesting to map the history of the appearances of different nuances of emotions that painted the world continents around the centuries and around the divinities. For example, in the Egyptian Muslim ballads on Mahoma, or family in the Sephardic ballads as well as Croatian. The researchers, especially in the Hispanic world, had taken into account almost all the nuances of poetical discourse. Everything matters in the ballad. The studies of appearances of different colors and different clothes were examined in the relationship toward the particular family roles, for example, and historical trade and custom circumstances. The world of plants was particularly well studied too, as if the pan-European balladry was a kind of the Temple of Flora by Robert John Thornton, re-elaborated. As a kind of a gift from the sky of the natural elements of diamond sky to the humanity, from the Cleopatra Aristotelian Sophocles time, and in Parnassus, when the response to someone's question wasn't silenced, but re-elaborated into another poem or verse. The ballad is not the necropolitics, as Renata Jambrasic-Kiron used this term yesterday. I added to my paper. The ballad is not the necropolitics. The theory of pan-Hispanic balladry by Diego Catalán Menéndez Pidal pointed nicely, as well as one by Ramón Menéndez Pidal, the theory of translation of every ballad verse, taking into account the content as well as form almost mathematically. On the contrary, the academician Maja Bošković-Stuli, a Croatian academician and folklorist, very well known worldwide, relied on the structuralist methodology in the impressionist paintings of particular ballad types. The Warrior Maiden, or in Hektorovich Bugartica, Tidings of Death ballads, for example. that I studied a few years ago. From Aristotle to Hegel, depending on the possibilities of cultural tourism and individual interests in international love ballads and family ballads, these ballads cross linguistic and cultural frontiers, always related with a joyful recognition of the sameness or similarities. On the contrary, adultery ballads, far from entering into the criminal dossier, problematize the relationship of a truth and a particular ecological niche, or the fidelity and individual concentration and work possibilities that are thought in a cultural terms, not familiar terms. Far from being the Almighty God, the ballads show historically that they cannot stop the historical excesses of hysteria. For example, in the year before the Second World War. The phenomenon of the existence of international ballads recognize with happiness the sameness in the plot and characters between different nations and foster the philological mind that oppose to the seductive fishing of the ring that threatens emigration troubadouresque thrive of taming of a show. To emigrate to another country for be falling in love with a beautiful lady, the ballad doesn't know since the medieval times of Benjamin of Tudela, a Spanish and Hebrew writer, who tried to calm down the popular book of critics. The troubadouresque ballad voyage as a voyage sponsored by nature turned sometimes to be a glamorous illustration story, searching for the truth and justice and love, and not the search for the lost time that turns down the balladesque Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage, Mecca and Medina town as a meeting point, a place of holiness and meditation. In this respect, Santiago refuses to be a Celestinesque place of encounter, but turns out to be a place of interchange of cultural goods, of ballads in the glory of cultural tourism and the happiness of telling an interesting poetic story immersed in a mystery of creation and recreation with the pathos of the real or reinvented thanks to the photographs and letters of the Mont Blanc romantic family, not avant-garde family, and social heritage encounter with the mystery of nature and romantic love with the age of beginning and the creation story. Rejecting the Italo-Calvino sphere of telling an interesting story. The ballad can be seen also as a corrective to the ignorance and disrespect of female forbidding the reappearance of an already individually and familiarly forbidden eternal love. A second chance to try to narrate a beautiful pedagogical story of jumping into the shoes of feminine ludens that requires a plenitude of versions as the faraway image of the Pope-Borgian interplay of the first and the third instinct, not only for the sake of the historical family heritage porters of the sentimental goods, but for the creation of paradisiacal collaboration and family and friendship surrounding and ecological niche. Thank you. I finished my paper.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Delic.
I'm not professor. Okay, I finished as a professor of Spanish language and literature, but I'm only a doctor scientist exclusively.
Okay. We were supposed to be 5 in the beginning, but the first speaker, Pujaman, and the fourth speaker, Aysegul Saktika, could not make it. So now it is supposed to be, it should be my turn, actually. How can I see, I just need to share the screen, isn't it?
Yeah, I see you.
Yes,
I see you.
yes, yes. You can share your screen, yes, if you...
Okay. Okay, now you see my PowerPoint, and now I'm going to put it in full screen. Okay. Well, okay. Thank you for being here. I'm the last speaker of this panel on emotional regimes. My name is Mario Talamo, and I'm associate researcher at the Centre de Recherche sur les Civilisations de l'Asie Orientale in Paris, and adjunct professor at the University of Catania in Italy. Today I'm going to talk about my paper title is Women and Emotions, Changes of Leadership and the Implications in the Late Edo Period. We're talking about a time span, a Japanese time span that goes from the 17th century till the second half of the 19th century. Okay, during the last century of the Edo period, in the immediate aftermath of the Kansei reforms, the most part of the narrative production had to serve the ambitions of the military government, intending to spread through the readership the new Confucian orthodoxy, and in order to control those social groups that were particularly active from an economic point of view, and that constituted a threat to the for the social order that the military government desperately tried to preserve. However, in a few years, these edicts lost their grip over the populace, and new ethical paradigms came out. These were influential also on tales of vengeance, or katakyuchi mono in Japanese, a production that was created as a mean of propaganda, of Neo-Confucian propaganda, of course. In the immediate aftermath of the Kansei reforms, the tales of vengeance were very simple, had a very simple structure made of only 10 functions, as you can see on the left, and a very simple list of characters composed by only 5 dramatis personae. Besides that, the readership had no specific sexual connotation, as the propaganda, the political propaganda, was directed to the entire population. So the aim of my paper is to show an evolution of the readership of vendetta tales, or katakyuchi mono in Japanese, and to see how, together with a new audience, new functions, dramatis personae, and paradigms developed, transforming the original format. My paper is based on a corpus of 7 tales of vengeance issued from the immediate aftermath of Kansei reform, so from the end of the 18th century to the 6th decade of the 19th century. These are Katakyuchi Gijo no Hanabusa by Nansensho Somahito from 1795, Katakyuchi Sumi Yoshimode and Tengajaya Homare no Adauchi by Jippen Shaiku from 1799, Katakyuchi Magotaru Mushi by Santo Kyoden from 1806, Katakyuchi Yomeo Shidani by Shikitei Samba from 1807, Katakyuchi Ayado Banashi by Goryutei Tokusho from 1832, Katakyuchi Teijo Kagami by Santo Kyozan from 1844, and finally Iga no Adauchi by Dontei Robun from 1860. This text represents the different stages of the late Edo intellectual history. So from the first years of the 19th century, women turned into one of the most important targets of the publishing industry of Japan, thanks to the rise in literacy that invested the entire society. Whereas in the previous centuries, no literary production was tailored on a women requests that were often associated with children in terms of literary choices. From the beginning of the 19th century, they turned into into a new group of consumers, and several publishers started to study their tastes in order to create the perfect work that could match their interests. This was the case of Ninjobon, books about feelings and sentiments that were published from the beginning of the 19th century exclusively for women. As I said before, in the beginning, the Tales of Vengeance from late Edo period had no modern readers, but we can actually outline the evolution of the readership by analyzing the dramatis persona of the donor that usually reflects the type of audience the writers address to, because works with a male donor aimed at the female readers. By applying these theories to the text of my corpus, it is clear that only the first Tale of Vengeance of the selection, Katakiuchi Gijono Hanabusa from 1795, has a female donor, Oshun, and that it addressed to a male readership. The first transformation happened from Jipensha Iku's text, where we have a couple of female donors, Osechi and Somenoi, whose main task was to collect the money to enable the group of avengers to travel around the country. As a sign of the new time, these two female donors did not succeed. The first died, and the second was sold as a courtesan, as you can see in the pictures. After their disappearance, we notice the first man donor of the corpus, Ikaruga Koemon, witnessing the change of the size of readership. This, from the beginning of the 19th century, the text of my corpus show only male donor. This, and turning the late Edo Tales of Vengeance into one of the first production tailored on the tastes of the female readership of 19th century Japan. So the turn to a new audience brought many changes concerning the structure, the dramatis personae, but also the expression of feelings and emotions. So although the old 10 functions of Tales of Vengeance still constitute the main frames of the production, together with the involvement of a new readership, new motives appeared in the morphology, and they were tightly connected with specific tastes and requests. Just to mention an example, the fifth Tale of Vengeance of my corpus, Katakiuchi Ayado Banashi from 1832, presents two new functions, two tasks in which the protagonist, Juzo, meets his old friend Sano Mataichi, who takes him to the borders where Juzo had to resist and to prove his vow of chastity, and a new passage in which Juzo meets the beautiful courtesan Tamakazura and accepts to take her with him, trying not to fall in love with her. Of course, this was a task unaccomplished, as the two become a couple, even if Juzo had to respect a vow of chastity. Katakiuchi Teijo Kagami, which is the fifth text of my selection by Santo Kyosen from 1844, is the only Tale of Vengeance of my corpus that clarifies immediately the type of audience it addressed to, women from the lower and middle strata. And of course, it clarifies also its aim to educate women in order to turn them into good servants. So among his functions, we notice the violation of the rules of the house after the meeting between the protagonist, Osayo, and a man named Jusuke, which turns into the reason why Osayo gets fired. It is clear that when Tales of Vengeance turned to a new audience, the morphology of the text absorbs its stasis by elaborating new functions. which express women's mental structures and predilections, for example, love stories, and by creating new characters. The first sign of the turn to a new audience was clear in the donor. However, also the protagonist's vicissitude changed. So when women became the new target of Tales of Vengeance, authors modeled the plot according to their requests, and also feelings and sentiments acquired a new role. Love stories became the favorite subplot, and very interestingly, we noticed the creation of new characters. These do not become an active part of the plot, but joined the narrative only in the sections that women were supposed to enjoy the most. Their role differs according to the sex of the main characters. As a matter of fact, actually, the new characters attempt at corrupting the virtue and the moral integrity of the main characters. Women are femme fatale, while men are tempters. This is the case of Tamakazura in Katakyuchi Ayado Banashi, of the beautiful courtesan Tamakazura, who conquers Juzo's heart, or maybe the case of Jusuke in Katakyuchi Teijo Kagami, who tempts Osayo's virtue. Their role resembles to the influencer from Claude Bremont theories, as they can change the status quo. It is logical that with these new topics and characters, the plot of Tales of Vengeance developed. So the expansions of the narrative material in Katakyuchi Mono took place and was granted by the evolution of the publishing panorama of the late Edo period that went from kibiyoshi, works shorter and with pages filled with illustration, to the Gokan, volumes composed by more kibiyoshi bound together, whose length could reach also the 10 tomes, enabling the author to prolong the vicissitudes of the Avenger. When women became the new target of Tales of Vengeance, we also noticed a new attitude towards feelings and emotion. When Tales of Vengeance were created, they actually were produced to disseminate over the readership the new Confucian orthodoxy supported by the military government. And the orthodoxy found several ways of expression through the pages. For example, titles, works titles and characters' names often referred to Confucian virtues, or even the vengeance, the practice of vengeance, was expression of filial piety and loyalty that were two of the most important Confucian virtues. New Confucianism actually was hostile to the expressions of feelings and emotions, and so were the first Tales of Vengeance. According to Jusi, the most important thinker in the New Confucian orthodoxy, feelings and sentiments could have a negative influence on individuals, as they could mislead a man from the right path. Contrarily to what Confucius said, emotion were strictly forbidden in the New Confucian vision of life. This conception appeared also in Tales of Vengeance, in which love, frustrated ambition, wounded honor, and jealousy were the reason why the antagonist kills the victim. When women became the new engine of Katakyuchi Mono, we noticed a different attitude towards feelings. Although the murder still took place because of uncontrolled feelings, we noticed the evolution of the vision of emotion, that from negative and misleading went to positive and restorative. This, for example, in Santo Kyoden text, love is the reason why Oyanagi Hitokaku, the antagonist, kills the victim, but it also turns into the reason why Kaname, the victim, come back into the world of the livings and reveals the identity of the culprit to his son. In Shikite Samba's text, love leads Kazuma to the valley of Yomeodoshi, while in Santo Kyosan, in the end, love turns into the natural impulse, suggesting Osayo, the protagonist, the heroine, to lick the blind eyes of the little Otsuyu and to finally heal her. So the vision of feelings and sentiments changed, not only because of the contribution by female readers, but also because of the evolution of the intellectual panorama of the late Edo period. Late Edo intellectual milieu was ruled by two main groups: the Neo-Confucian scholars, of course, and the Kokugakusha, a group called Kokugakusha in Japanese, that were philologists and men of letters interested in the Japanese ancient literary tradition. Their studies stood in opposition with the entire Neo-Confucian production. One of the main peculiarities of the Japanese religions, and I'm using the plural because I mean when I talk about Japanese religion, I'm talking about Buddhism, Shintoism, and also Confucianism. So one of the main peculiarities of Japanese religion is the porosity, ergo the capacity of each of these three beliefs to influence the others, tenets and ideas that first belonged to a single tradition, with times circulated and were absorbed by the other tradition. This is the case of the virtue of parsimony, that born in the Confucian milieu, absorbed by the Neo-Confucian economists, and ended up in the sermons of the Kokugakusha in the aftermath of the political turmoil of the late Edo period, in order to show the people how to live without showing off, living in parsimony and without showing off. So the group of nativists of Kokugakusha was also responsible for the reappreciation of sentiments and feelings that were related to their studies on the ancient Japanese poetry of the 8th century and to its peculiarity of free inspiration and free expression of authentic feelings. So these instances were then received and merged by the publishing industry with the contribution of female readers. Moreover, Kokugakusha were also responsible for the raising of the interest of the average readers in the classical tradition, in the literary canon of Japan, which influenced the whole production issued from the end of the 18th century onward. So quotations from works, literary works belonging to the canon, were quite diffuse and popular. This text acquired a widespread reputation among the whole readers. For example, quotations from Genji Monogatari, Ise Monogatari, and Hojo-ki were very popular in the entire narrative production, but in particular in Tales of Vengeance, when women turned into the new target of the production. These texts were also the textbooks adopted by schools and private academies for young women. So the tendency to quote passages from these works began with Santo Kyoden, with the third text, and continue with the beginning of the 19th century, and continued until the end of my selection. So when the modern readers changed, we notice also new features in the structure, in the morphology of the text. This is the case of the new function of final combat. In the beginning, when Tales of Vengeance were tailored on a male readership, the Avengers used a nagayari, a long javelin, a long spears, to kill the antagonist with a penetrating movement. When Tales of Vengeance turned to a female readership, the Avengers started to use the sword to cut the enemy's head off with a castrating movement. So, for example, Avengers in Jippen Shaiku's text are all armed with javelins, with long javelins, which are penetrating weapons, while in Santo Kyoden's text, the heroine, Sakurado, uses a sickle to avenge on the villains. The sickle is a castrating weapon because it cuts. The evolution of the readership is also clear in the glissement of the thaumaturgical powers. While in Santo Kyoden's text, we notice that it is the dead body of the father Kaname that heals, that generates white worms that will heal the son Magotaro. In Santo Kyoden, in Santo Kyoden's text from 1844, it is the milk coming out of Osayo's breast, so a woman that will heal the helper's daughters. We also notice a general feminization of the vengeance, while the avenger use castrating weapons after the involvement of women, the antagonists continue using their penetrating swords. In conclusion, we can say that with this paper, I try to outline the evolution of the readership of late Edo tales of vengeance, or Katakyuchi Mono. And of course, I try to outline its implications. I show that the evolution of the readership was clear in the sex of the donor and resulted into new functions such as the tasks and the final combat, and new characters such as the tempters or the femme fatale. But most importantly, the evolution of the readership brought a new vision of feelings that from negative and misleading went to positive and restorative. Thank you for your attention. Okay. Okay, now it is the end. I'm supposed to be the last one, so we can start a Q&A section. We still have a lot of time because we were just the three of us. We can ask for with a Q&A section. There's there's David Hopkins that raised his digital hand. If you want, you can talk. You can open your microphone and talk. Oh, okay. A chat, just a clap. Okay, just a clap to all of us. Thank you. Does someone else has a question? Okay, so maybe I can abuse of my privilege of being the convener and start with a question to Velina. I still don't, okay. Oh, yes, that's David Hopkins asked it. What I wanted to ask you actually, David Hopkins wouldn't mind hearing a Karelian lament if there are any available. Is that possible? Remember that you're still mute. You should unmute.
Yes, yes, it's possible. Just a moment. So I got it from from my computer. So it takes a minute because I need to connect there. But it's possible, of course. So I try another. If this would work.
Yes.
Yeah, now you can hear it. Yep.
Качастула валия женькando мадина мил пережирга, кайноли на собой приглашение глуаиту, кайноли кузажи и срунажи места нажецой тету, печально телеграмма жедане. Avainen mikse tulen tukerdarin on naisen kantajaisen pihasilla. Kaikki viset, krepostiset kirvottu, rautaset pistoset langettu. Tuletto naisen kantajaisen portaasissaga, musta tuolori varhattaset on ojenteltu. Portaasis on polkaset pakuttu. Tuletto vesaset kuvetäisissaga, veräsis on käkäset kirvottu. Ladusis on mustat najaskaset, ikkunasille vieltetty. Tuletto kanei ladusiga parahadilla, koset on latjasis katkettu. Gontejan kallisnainen kantajaiseni, keltylä liikkeellisil, kylmänisil kuvasil, villusin luvilma. Naisen kantajaisen kai kudaset ikävät, lukusiani lukusian tuokse lukoitu.
I will pause now because it's, as you hear, it is not that much the emotion sounds, but then I go further.
Yeah, because do they raise their voice sometimes?
It is not that they raise, but it changes here. I will put it somewhere here, as you can hear it then more.
Mä piluttomille kälysille pakorojakseen valijaseni, ketulle kallishyväseni, sen ilmaisilta mitä rakasin vasta. Kerubia kyvernästynä kwa kysymä, vielä verekseni viestille. Kansukaleni väsen kaimarin hädälle näinelle skinnyrinakkiloima.
And this is the face. I forgot to tell that this is a traditional ritual lament with which the lamenter calls for the deceased one's relatives to the funeral and tells that in this case the lamenter's sister is dead. And now when you might also hear the little sounds of the emotion coming audible, the narration turned to all the biographic memories, and the lamenter sends some reminiscing her dead husband, and then towards the end the emotion still intensifies, and somewhere here it is the text is about her dead son. So I just put the end for you here.
Aduman kandamani kasatele, tendele kajonolo radosiga, rubianaga mastuna butelema, tualeina zelele besedile mese, akando mutoni gase, diskemette mediki biase, igase tystemette me balase. Kalliskanda muut kalnehedi runkaset kulutteli radasia rattasia naal. Kalnehet kudriset kaivattiin stannoloin traktorasia naal.
So then it just ends. And yeah. I can tell that this was recorded in a fieldwork interview, so it's not in the authentic situation in that sense that it would be the real funeral situation, but and then of course in those situations the thing would be very different in some sense, but in others not, and as you could hear, or I assume that you could also hear that the emotional state was quite clear here, and that it is not the difference between the situation, even though it was in not ritual
I
context.
also have another question about for you about the funeral, since you said that the other world is always connected, is always present in this kind of Karelian lament, and when there's a funeral in Karelia, they used to sing this lament.
Yes.
And do they? I mean, the lament is performed by a specific person which has a technical background, or by someone took by chance, or by one of the participants to the funeral?
In Karelian laments and in the past Karelia, because it's not or anymore that much used, or there's no one knows, but it is assumed that there is no the similar rituals anymore. So it was 3 days, the funeral, and the lamenting started from the moment that the death was kind of from the death moment to the actual burial in the graveyard, and it was that it is said that all women know how to lament in Karelia, and it was just that all the near ones lamented, and in some cases if there weren't, or maybe that way I will say that it was always solo performances, and in that sense that when one lamented, and then when her lament came in, then another sang her lament, and that way. So it wasn't this way. It is a specialist role, but it is not a specialist person, but in that sense. And the other world, it is the mythic background, which is said that because the lament language it is different than the spoken language in Karelia, and it used very metaphoric poetic language and uses very special lexicon and these forms that, and the texts are not always, or have not always been even clear for the Karelian community, and it is said that the lament text is a language that is heard in the other world, and the ritual functions where that the laments kind of they are speech to the other world, and the lamenter asks them to take this new there, and or then just tells her grievings and sorrows for those there.
Because like I think every country has its own way of lamenting.
Yeah.
Because we also have lament in Italy. We had, as you said, in the past. And also in the ancient Greek and Roman tradition, we had people specialize in lamenting during the funeral, but they got paid actually. They got paid. Also in Karelia, they received an amount of money at the end of the performance?
Well, it is a thing that, well, it is not clear, and some, well, I can't say yes or no, but some researchers have come to the kind of result that there have been some kind of payments, but then again, the lamenters have maybe felt it a bit insulting, even if for example, using the term of professional lamenter, because it has been this kind of thing that everybody does. And then so there have been some kind of maybe payments, but it is not for profession, but just that some kind of thank you for lamenting here, or then it has just been this kind of thing that everybody knows that this needs to be done, and I'm going to lament here. So it's not that kind of profession that is paid. I was in folklore fellow summer school this summer, and we had the discussion about laments, and we had one from India, and they, or it's actually there were two participants from India in the discussion, and they told about the Indian tradition, and it was very, very interesting because they have this kind of it was very different, but still the same, that, and they had this professional lamenting thing. And then one of my colleagues is doing research with the comparing the Greece tradition and the Karelian tradition, and it's also very interesting.
Okay, I see. Then I had another question for Simona Delic. Just a curiosity, because I know you mentioned Hasanaginica as a ballad, and then you say that ballads can be seen as the pioneer of tourism and connected to pilgrimage, and yeah, how would you connect Hasanaginica with the pilgrimage? How could you connect? It is okay that Hasanaginica, as you said, was meant to show the skills of women, because Hasanaginica was the wife of the Hasan Aga. So how would you connect Hasanaginica with pilgrimage and tourism? I can hear you. You should unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Okay.
Thank you for this question. I never thought about this till now, but when you mention, I think that the topic of Orientalism that pervades this ballad, because this is a ballad of Muslim content, in noted down in also Oriental surroundings, but then cultivated in 19th century Croatia by Croatian romantic poets and Serbian even romantic poets. So I think that maybe this is a dream of a paradise between Jerusalem and Mecca and Medina, kind of imagination that why can't we live all happy together without ugly stories. So I think that this is the only thing of the connection of. I don't think that as a ballad that has exact plot and characters and the discourse, one can say that it is connected as a pilgrimage, but as a motive, maybe one can talk about Arne Thompson motives and find parallels. But as a concrete ballad, it was not transmitted, but during the literary translations by romantic poets, German romantic poets. So I don't think that it is a way also, if we think about translation as a cultural tourism too, when Goethe translated and was writing a poetry on Mediterranean topics. It is a way of cultural tourism, but not as a pilgrimage of common people that that were traveling by foot or on horse and coming to Santiago de Compostela, for example, and walking for miles and miles and kilometers, and even as if today I have a neighbor that recently went to Santiago de Compostela, and she told me that she was staying at some little hostels, and met some people and even show me some photographs of the group of people. And this encounter creates the possibility of recounting an interesting story. And I think that is a way of connecting traditional ballads with cultural tourism. But in a, I wouldn't say that it is a similar way. Literary tradition is much more serious than oral tradition in this respect, but because it has a different surrounding and economy of, how should I say, and bibliographical references. But oral poetry can exist as artisan poetry. And the literary ballad is connected with literary tradition and bibliography and libraries, and etc. and literary contexts. I think that the literary contexts are very important, and the literary tradition balladry doesn't exist a writer without connection with other friends and literary writers, for example. I don't know. Have I explained well?
Okay, yes, yes.
He wasn't alone. He had common people and many friends surrounded him. So I think that this is, on the other hand, the common people has its everyday life, and but also have friends. And this way it is in an anthropological kind of way, humanist, let me say, it is similar situation. So.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Does the audience has a question? Oh, no, you're welcome. Does the audience has a question? If you have, in this case, you can raise your digital hand or write a question in chat. Oh, there's a, oh, Ivana Berkovic raised her hand.
Yes, I have a question for you, and it was a very interesting presentation. And as I understood, you mentioned that in the earlier male tales of vengeance, emotions are not thematized, and after the feminization, they started to be thematized. But in these earlier tales, which kind of emotions are implied? That's something I would like to know.
Thank you, thank you. Only the grief. One of the most recurrent words in the first corpus, in the first part of the corpus of Tales of Vengeance, when we can say that they were tailored on a male readership, is the word munen, which in Japanese means rancor, grief, because after the murder, the Tales of Vengeance is after the murder of the head of the family, the son of the murdered people got poor. He lost everything. The samurai lost everything, his social belongings and his social, of course, the money. So because of this treason of the antagonist, he lost everything. The feelings that he felt was only grief, and the grief was the basis for the future vengeance. On the basis of the grief, he wanted to avenge on his enemies. The only feeling that you can read more than once in a single volume, munen, 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 which means the rancor and grief. That was the only feelings. While when women turned into the main topics, you read love stories, for example. But this happened because the publishing industry discovered actually that also women were interested in reading works, literary works. And so women actually enjoyed love stories.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Does somebody else have a question? not even in chat. So maybe if no one has a question, we can just end the the section.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay.
Okay, so we can end. Thank you very much for being here. It was very interesting. So maybe see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
No dobro? Uspjela si sigurno. Vidiš? Čekaj, ali to Zoom ili Skype? Koja je to tehnologija? Zoom.